He's going to change over the computers here, but since Christian and Dennis took so much of my material, I'm going to do my one-man musical about Philadelphia sports. Thank you. Go Birds. No. Fly, Eagles, fly. Anyway, that would be crazy, right? Like, that'd be career suicide. No, I do appreciate all of the references that were thrown out there by our two hosts here. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for being here. First of all, good morning. Good morning. That was pretty good. Now let's try it from a Philadelphia Eagles perspective. Good morning. Good morning. All right. So who here has seen this map before? Raise your hand. Okay, pretty decent percentage. This is why I get called the media cartographer. This is a map that I started making about 5 years ago. This is what it looked like 5 years ago. This is it today, 5 years ago. And there are a couple of things to, first of all, this is just based on math. It's not my opinion. This is based on the market valuations of the 140 so companies on this map. I also dig into the earnings reports of all the 100 plus public companies on this map every single quarter, quarter after quarter. So while I do add color to my insights, they're very rarely simply opinions. They're based on math. They're based on data. They're based on facts that are absolutely demonstrably provable. And so when we have arguments over whether or not YouTube is television, it really helps to put your feelings aside and focus on the data and the facts, because otherwise we get lost in opinion, and that can be troublesome. So let's just look at the facts over the last 5 years. So this is the first map in August of 2020. This is the map today. And what you can find is that as then, this was not a prediction of something to come. This was not a prognostication of what was about to be. This was a statement of fact. Big tech had taken over media. This was as true then as it is today. Let me give you a little bit of demonstration. Who here has a smartphone? Okay, who here has an Apple smartphone? Who here has an Android smartphone with green bubbles? Who here has something other than one of those two phones? 100% of the smartphone market is controlled by just two companies. That was as true back then as it is today. Big tech has overtaken media. Who here has a smartphone? Who here is the smartphone the first thing they touch in the morning? Be honest. Who here is a smartphone the last thing they touch at night? Sorry for your significant others. So whether or not you're watching a piece of video or reading a Substack newsletter like mine, Media, War, and Peace, which you can subscribe to on your phone right now, I'll wait. Whether or not you're reading it on a computer or watching a piece of video on that smartphone is now the remote control of your life. 100% of consumers who use that remote control to control their suite of all services, not just media, health. I got here on an Uber, I ordered it on my smartphone. I'll also pay for it with my Zelle through my smartphone. Who here has a banking app on their smartphone? Who here read the terms and conditions before they installed that banking app? Okay, good luck with that. So these two companies now are, Apple and Alphabet, are now in control of the remote controls of all suites of services, media and otherwise, on the planet Earth. But while they are the tool, the whip, that controls our media, that controls our other lifestyle services, the user makes all of the decisions. The user uses that whip, uses that remote control. Those companies don't make the choices, the consumer does. And so we have left the top-down gatekeeper era. We left it 5 years ago, actually 6 years ago now, this fall, when Disney went direct to consumers, throwing out their entire business model without thinking about it, and all of the other horsemen of the media apocalypse charged after them down Netflix's rabbit hole and gave all of the choice, all of the power direct to the consumer. So we are no longer in the last era. And by the way, we left it 5-6 years ago. We are now in the user-centric era. The user-centric era is about letting the consumer dictate the trends, agreeing that we are in service of our audiences, not the other way around. Broadcast television was a push medium. We are now in an interchange. We are now in a medium where community is the dominant force, and I'll talk more about that later. But the way that you survive in the user-centric era, and the way that you do more than survive, but also thrive and succeed and win, is to agree to the terms of the user-centric era, understand that they are now in control, and then understand who the fuck your audience is. By the way, my YouTube videos always have curse words. So as we were talking about, and Christian talked about this, these are the demographics, right? Demographics don't change. The 18 to 49 demographic will always be the 18 to 49 demographic. But as Christian so eloquently put, those demographic terms were determined and defined in an era that was defined by the television season. And the television season is based on the school year, and the school year is based on the farming calendar. So if you're still using vanity metrics from the last era, you might as well go out and buy a plow and grow some hay. So these, right now, the world's population is almost 2/3 under the age of 40. And there was a time where I thought that the dividing line for media consumption and habits was over 40 and under 40. But then I dug in deeper into the demographics of the planet. There's a great book called The Fourth Turning by Strauss and Howe that talks about how generations are shaped by the context of history. And if you think about how millennials and Gen Zs have grown up, the first consumers in the history of the world with supercomputers in their pockets, to grow up on social media, the COVID, the lockdown, the first election being Donald Trump. They don't just see the world differently, they live in different worlds. And here's the thing about the planet Earth. Demographics don't age. 18 to 49 will always be 18 to 49, but generations do. These are the generations that now populate the planet Earth. Generation Alpha is now turning 12 and 13. Generation Z is turning 30 this year. Millennials are turning 45. So when the 18 to 49 demographic is entirely Gen Z and millennials, you have to think about it differently than you did 10 years ago. Generation Z and millennials are not children, they're having children. Or, very often, not. They're making very different decisions about the planet based on the context of how they were raised, and by the way, who they were raised by. So you have to understand who these generations are and the context through which they see your media, your advertising, your messages. Right now, the planet's population is 69%, almost 70% millennials and younger. The population of the planet Earth is now 70% millennials and younger. In the US, about 58% of the population are millennials and younger, and this is where Christian stole my joke. 54% of the workplace are currently millennials and Gen Z, and Gen Alpha will be in the workplace before the end of this decade. So if you're not prepared to run the world through the consumer base of 54% of the workforce, and by the way, there are now more Generation Z in the workforce than there are boomers, there are more millennials in the workforce than there are Gen X. They are not just kids, they are our bosses increasingly, right? They're starting companies, many of them. And so we need to look through the lens of our own businesses as the generations that control the dollars that run our businesses and our platforms. The key here is to not have a fear of finding out. So often, people raised their phones to take a picture of that generational breakdown. That's infinitely findable on the internet. It is just fucking math, right? And yet people have a fear of finding out. They scream things at me on LinkedIn in big, bold cap letter, and they don't put any data in their opinion. It's just all feels, right? Because they don't want to find out that the things they believe are no longer relevant. The fear of finding out is the existential crisis in the media economy right now. It is driving really bad decisions, like taking Jimmy Kimmel off the air as if that was a smart thing. $4 billion in market capitalization lost later, they're like, oops. Maybe if they had asked someone from Generation Z who works at that company, is this a good idea? What do you think? They might have found out, okay, boomer, not such a good choice. So the key is don't have a fear of finding out. Look at the data. It's all available to you. Understand what is good data and what is bad data, but also look at the data that's surrounding you. What's happened is we've added all of these choices, all these platforms, infinite choice on infinite devices. People who here has signed up for a premium streaming service, watched the heck out of something, and then canceled it before the next billing cycle? Raise your hand. You're the fucking problem. Churn is now an existential crisis in the media economy because it's never been easier to sign up for a service. It's also never been easier to cancel it. In the last year, consumers on the planet Earth, and by the way, this goes region by region, have cut back on 6% of their media. That's a half an hour of media usage per day. And this isn't just about putting down glass and going out and touching grass. This is canceling services. I may have 3 streaming services at a time, but I may use 6 of them over the course of a year. Serial churners are now 40% of all new subscribers in the SVOD environment. People who sign up and cancel 3 services over the course of a year. And this is what happens. Yes, we had this major peak in usage, and that was especially driven by COVID. This big burst of usage, this big burst of economics was all entirely created by a crisis. And that crisis has major influence. And now the world is cutting back. They're signing up for a ton of services. The average consumer has about 14 different services, but less than half of them are things that they'll never cancel. Yeah, who here has signed up and canceled either Hulu or HBO Max or Paramount Plus or Peacock in the last year? Now, who here has signed up or canceled Amazon Prime? Who here has Amazon Prime? Raise your hand. Who here has canceled it in the last year? 2 people out of 100, right? By the way, I canceled it last fall because Jeff Bezos is a dickhead. Prove me wrong. I don't miss it at all. We hold on to it because we believe we're getting free shipping. That shipping ain't free. Try it out for a month. What's happening is this churnpocalypse. So pay TV is just falling off a cliff. And by the way, pay TV usage is decelerating. Cancellations are accelerating month by month by month. Watch what happened in the second half of this year after this whole Jimmy Kimmel thing, and it'll even pick up more steam. Pay TV is actually falling faster than broadcast TV right now. So this is a major change in the American landscape. But SVOD is also a churnpocalypse in and of itself. You demonstrated it earlier. In 2024, all of SVOD signed up 174 million new subscribers and lost 148 million subscribers. I don't go to business school, but I'm pretty sure that's the term for this is a shitty business. The remarketing, the costs of remarketing, the cost of content to keep people happy, this is a major crisis. And this is also why premium streaming is not necessarily the best advertising environment. Even if you can get an ad in one of the pieces of content, which is not always that easy, do you know that audience is going to be around for more than 30 days? So you may get a little bit of reach, but you're not going to get any frequency. This is Nielsen's chart for the first quarter of 2025. They say that 72% of all television or all video on TV is ad-supported, right? This is from ComScore, a thing I did last year. 86% of all ads on the television are in pay TV and broadcast. And what the media universe has convinced itself is, well, linear television and pay TV and broadcast still irrelevant. No, and I'll show you why. This is the top 10 television shows in 1975, right? My favorite show of all time, All in the Family. 500 million people reached with just the top 10 television shows. If you're wondering how Don Draper could drink at work, this explains it. This is the top 10 television shows in March of this year. The top 10 television shows now don't reach the #1 audience. Just one show. And by the way, this was 22 weeks average. This was not the special episode after the Super Bowl. This was when it was live on the television. Now, you're getting 8 million people in a television show, not even getting the total of the top show then. And look at these shows. Look at them. This is the same 6 to 8 million old motherfuckers watching those 86% of those ads on television and pay TV, it's the same audience over and over and over, and they're getting older and older. The average demographic of this audience is dead 5 years. Most of this audience is watching because the television's still on and they fell asleep 2 hours ago. So this is what television represents. So yes, 86% of ads are seen on pay TV and broadcast because it's the same people over and over and over again. And this is from Innovid, a study. 80% of the campaigns that you're going to run on connected television are missing the mark because the data is not terrific and because the targeting is really, really shitty. Some of it is okay. Pay TV, you get good addressable advertising there, you get deterministic data, but a lot of the rest of streaming and FAST and all these other platforms, it's not very targeted and it's wasteful, 80% wasteful. Now, look at what the television landscape looks like today. This is July. Dennis had more accurate information than I did, but this is July. As you can see that YouTube is now bigger than all of the rest of television. By the way, it's bigger than all of Disney combined, all of NBC Universal combined. It's as big as Paramount and Fox combined and bigger than Disco Brothers, or whatever they're called this month, and Paramount Skydance combined, right? And then, by the way, 28% of it is other. So this is great data, Nielsen. Thanks so much. When you look at Netflix and YouTube side by side, Netflix's viewership is plateaued. And this is territory by territory across the planet Earth. Meanwhile, YouTube takes up a bigger and bigger share almost every single month. Now, August, they dipped a little bit down to 13.1%, but then they had the first NFL game on YouTube in September. I imagine that percentage will go back up again. So Netflix is a very powerful platform, but only 22% of it allows for advertising, and how much of that is actually reaching the intended audience that you're thinking of? YouTube is now almost as big of all broadcast combined. By this time next year, YouTube will be bigger than all of broadcast combined, right? FAST is actually pretty big. It's almost combined. If you take all FAST together, it's almost as big as Netflix. But the data is terrible. It's atrocious. And when you talk to the publishers and the OEMs in that ecosystem, you're like, why can't we have more transparency? They're like, oh. That's a great answer. So when you think about how you're targeting things here, think about the waste in broadcast and pay, think about the lack of necessarily targeting on these platforms, and then you look at YouTube as another alternative. And by the way, YouTube is television. If it's watched on the TV, it is TV. 73% of YouTube content, viewing time, is on content 30 minutes or longer. If you're watching Frontline or PBS NewsHour or Joe Rogan or Alex Cooper on YouTube for an hour or more, it's television. But to Dennis's point, 98% of all YouTube, there are 4.6 million channels on YouTube. The top two deciles, the top two chunks, which is about 1 million channels, get 98% of viewership. And that feels like a tilted monolith to a certain extent. But as we said, it's almost 1 million channels. So when and that 1 million channels rotates in and out on an ongoing basis. So what are the 3 most important words in real estate? The 3 most important words in television advertising are fragmentation, fragmentation, fragmentation. These are the new rules. This is the new landscape. This is going to be harder than when Don Draper was buying stuff and drinking scotch. And if you're not okay with a fragmented world, if you're not okay doing all of the homework all of the time, this may not be the business for you. That's okay, go sell refrigerators or something. But if you want to work in this industry and you can do the homework and you can pay attention to the data, then you can win in this environment. But you have to know what the rules are and you have to pay attention to the data itself. There are 2 different ecosystems of media consumption on the planet Earth right now. They are very distinctive and they are completely separate. There are a couple of connection points, but for the most part, millennials and younger have one ecosystem, and Gen X and older have another ecosystem, each of them educated by the way they were raised. So if you grew up with a supercomputer in your pocket and all your friends on social media, you see the world through one lens. If you grew up with linear television, when it was on the TV, then that's how your perspective is framed. And you can see this in all of the data. So Netflix and younger, magazines and older. Look at the median age of primetime television. Look at the median age of cable news. By the way, there are two different areas where these two ecosystems cross and intersect. They are on Netflix and in podcasting. Those are the only two places I've seen where the two ecosystems kind of have a connective point. But these are two different media ecosystems. And it doesn't matter what country you're in or what platform you look at, I'm telling you, the data continues to prove this. So this is pay TV usage by age. Look at the drop-off. Where does it happen? 49, millennials and younger. This is local news usage by television or streaming. Look at where the big leap is and look at where the big drop is. Millennials and younger, Gen Xers and older. And this is the proof point of how generations age and influence the entire ecosystem. Millennials are now turning 45, right? They are now the big chunk of adults on the planet Earth, and homeowners and consumers and breadwinners. And so what happens is now most people get their news from social media. More people get their news from social media than any other source on the planet Earth. And that's the influence of millennials turning 45 and Gen Zers turning 30. Now when you look at specific usage, and this is streaming use on television only. This is GWI. This is a rather large sample size. I think this is 10,000 consumers in the US. You can see that for 16 to 24-year-olds, YouTube is now the biggest streaming platform on Earth. Fractionally, but still bigger than Netflix, bigger than Hulu, bigger than Disney. And by the way, the first time you get to a traditional media player is here at Warner Brothers Discovery. But to look at the influence of the generation shift, this is 25 to 34. Netflix pops up to number one. Netflix, oh, by the way, really quickly, YouTube, YouTube, YouTube. So add them together, and then suddenly YouTube is even more dominant than this initial number here. YouTube falls to number 2 with 25 to 34-year-olds, but again, YouTube, YouTube, YouTube. You gotta add up all the numbers. Netflix pops up to number 1 for 35-year-olds, but YouTube, YouTube, YouTube. And even for 55 plus, YouTube falls to number 3, but then when you add the kids and you add the premium, suddenly they are still a dominant force. So yes, YouTube is the number 1 channel for Gen Zers and younger. But increasingly, as millennials become the dominant adults in the United States, YouTube is just the biggest channel for everybody. And it's an incredibly powerful platform. 1 billion hours a day of YouTube is watched just on TV. That doesn't include laptops, that doesn't include phones, that doesn't include tablets. 400 million hours a month of podcasts are watched on TV. 1 billion people a month watch podcasts on television, including my podcast, Media Odyssey. You can subscribe to it right now. I'll wait. Raise your hand if you've watched a podcast on television. Raise your hand if you have someone in your house that watches YouTube on TV at least once a week. You don't have to trust my data. Look in your own lives. Do an ethnography of your own environment. Jimmy Kimmel was famously taken off the air. He famously came back on Tuesday night. Largest audience in a decade for him, 6.25 million people. By the way, less than 1% of all 18 to 49-year-olds in the United States watched it on television. In the 24 hours after he aired, 17 million people watched it on YouTube alone. That's now over 20 million. By the way, we know this was the average age of Dirt, and this was a much younger audience, median age probably 35, 36 years old. So which demographic do you want to try? Where do you want to put your dollars? And by the way, increasingly, we should think about where our dollars go and what message they send. Do you want to go to a place where 2 companies can turn off a television show in 30% of the country because they don't like it? Or, more importantly, because they have business in front of the FCC and they're trying to please a very certain someone? Or do you want to go somewhere where the audience and the artist get to talk to each other directly without those types of filters? Where you spend your money matters. Where you spend your money sends a message. So, creators are now the new Hollywood. They are now the center of cultural currency on the planet Earth. We know this because Joe Rogan decided the last election, and then 2 weeks later, Jake Paul broke Netflix by slapping an old man around a boxing ring. Right? They are now the center of cultural currency, not just for younger people, but especially for consumers under the age of 40. That's why Fast is doing everything they can to get creators on their platform. That's why Sony hired a head of creators. That's why Netflix, despite the fact that Ted Sarandos comes out and says to you, well, YouTube is just for wasting time, and then he goes and hires every YouTuber he can find. Right? That's why Mr. Beast got $100 million from Amazon. That's why Kill Tony was on Netflix. That's why everybody's rushing to put a creator inside their platform right now. This is a great example of how we are leaving the creator economy behind. We are leaving mainstream media behind, and we are coming to the intersection of both of them. Creators and publishers need to coexist in this new affinity economy, as I like to call it, and Christian blew my joke for me. But the concept is, when you embrace both ecosystems, millennials and younger, and Xers and older, you totally win. This is Enoch's Tag, who's the Mr. Beast of France. He made a documentary about him climbing Mount Everest. YouTube brought it to Cannes Film Festival. They premiered it in theaters, and then the next day, they put it on YouTube. Right? 10 million people watched it on YouTube in one day. 300,000 people bought tickets to see it in theaters in France alone. This is the intersection of both media economies. This is an example of a creator leaping from one ecosystem to the next. Another one is Angel Studios. This is Angel Studios. Does anybody here know what Angel Studios is? Angel Studios is a studio, an independent film studio that focuses on values-based content. They do not greenlight a film that their fans don't approve of. They put entire greenlight power in the hands of the consumer.
How do you get from the crowdfunding investment model to the guild community-based model? You empower, you actually do not greenlight films or projects that your members, the people who pay to subscribe and join your platform, they have to greenlight everything. Am I getting that correct?
Yes. The Angel Guild is a group of 1.5 million plus people. Wow. who can vote on every single project that comes into Angel. Right now, there's, I think, over 50 films being voted on inside of Angel. They are voting on those, and if they veto them, we cannot take them. This is the only studio that has ever done this, where if the audience, specifically this core group called the Angel Guild, who have joined specifically for this purpose, if they say no, we can't take a film. I can't take a film as the chief content officer. Content in other companies is very different than what I do. My job is just to build the guild and make sure that the audience and the guild and the filmmakers are talking.
So the key here is, it's not about content, it's about community. The community decides it, and then they become literal evangelists for the content itself. And by the way, when we talk about changing the KPIs from the vanity metrics of the past and moving them into the affinity economy, this is what I mean. Angel Studios is the second only to A24 in total box office over the last 3 years, but they did a fraction of the number of films of A24. They have the highest per-release box office average in all of independent film on the planet Earth. This is how you measure passion. This is how you measure affinity. It is based on a community-based model that turns out and embraces and loves not just the films, but the company itself. Brands need to take a lesson from this. It is very provably true. Yes, creators are the new Hollywood, but the rules of Hollywood are changing. Does anybody here know who Darman is? Darman is the largest creator of scripted content on the face of the earth. 5 hours of original scripted content every week. This is how he does it.
If you look at a traditional studio who's trying to create for YouTube, they come in thinking 6 to 7 figure budgets per episode, where it's like, no, you have to spend, somewhere around $1,000 per minute to create scripted content, not 10,000 or even 100,000 per minute that Hollywood is used to. So it's about staying scrappy and also getting formats that get a lot of views, ideally cross-platform.
Ideally cross-platform. And this is not going to be true for every piece of content, but the initial pieces of content, the test and learn model, require that you change your production to meet the rules of the creator economy. by the way, he's been so successful at this. We just launched his new Fast channel on Samsung TV Plus today, and we got a pretty decent upfront fee for it, as opposed to most deals that are just rev split. The cool thing about this is that when big brands and big publishers agree to obey the rules of the affinity economy, of the creator economy, they can be, and they are, dominant. I'll give you an example. CBC, we went to them and convinced them to take their premium long-form content and put it up on YouTube. And you can see that their entertainment channels where they put the content more than doubled their viewership. And they increased their revenue on their YouTube channel by 68%. The big pushback we got internally at CBC and Channel 4 and other organizations is, well, that'll cannibalize our audience on television and on our app. And I ask people, do you have data to support that feeling? And they go, well, no, it's just obvious. I'm like, that's not data. Here's the actual data.
If the hypothesis is cannibalization, you would expect that when you publish on a different platform like YouTube, it would take away from the consumption you get on your streaming service. The net result that we found from studying that was the opposite. It actually increased the engagement on our streaming service from the date it was published on YouTube.
And crucially, very dramatically different audiences. Here's the CBC YouTube audience, a generation younger than its app audience, 2 generations younger than its broadcast television audience. These are dramatically different audiences because these are 2 different ecosystems. The corporate media economy has grown 3% per year over the last 5 years. The creator economy, or as I like to call it, the affinity economy, has grown 25% per year over the last 5 years. Which train do you want to ride? Where do you want to go? There or there? By the way, this is the peak for them. Now it's going to start to contract. But the cool thing is, it's not either or. It is absolutely yes and. You can embrace, you should embrace both ecosystems because that's the only way you can get to 100% of your audience. But crucially, in the affinity economy, we have to abandon the vanity metrics designed for farming and embrace these new KPIs, these new ideas around how to measure passion and fandom.
I think KPIs, which I know you talk about a lot, is also a really
love data.
Same, absolute data geek. And I think moving away from views, which we do incredibly well with, 14 billion views last year, but views are quite a vanity metric at this point. There is how do you measure a view? What's the view the same? And moving more to that depth of engagement and thinking about watch time, and also how is our audience engaging with us? How do we actually measure that fandom? Because just because you viewed a piece of content doesn't make you a fan.
And by the way, this is Jasmine Dossman. She's not from Jelly Smack. She's not from Mythical Entertainment. She runs the digital enterprises at BBC Studios, one of the oldest, most traditional companies on the face of the earth. And they have an entirely changed business model around fandom first, creator mindset. That's how Bluey became the most streamed show on the planet Earth while also having 12 million subscribers on YouTube. By the way, same thing for BBC Earth, same thing for Doctor Who, same thing for Top Gear, for criminy sake. So we have to move from traditional KPIs to key passion index. Here's an engagement metrics and the value of fandom. Here's a good example. You can see here that National Geographic has over 250 million fans on Instagram, but they have almost 0 engagement. Dream or Chris Evans has a 6.5% engagement metric. 6.5% of his 19 million fans engage on every post that he has. Look at the difference in numbers. It isn't about scale for scale's sake. It's not about subscriber numbers at scale. That's why Netflix stopped reporting subscriber numbers this year. It's about the level of fandom and the level of engagement of each consumer. This is on YouTube. You can see Jordan the Stallion has an average engagement quality of about 3.9%. Meanwhile, Comedy Central basically gets no engagement when they post. Where do you want to be? Who do you want to engage with? Who do you want to be partners with? These are the new measurements of fandom. These are the new ways to measure passion. By the way, you want a good key passion index? Here you go. Angel Studios did a Reg A offering, which is a weird way to sell securities to non-credited investors. They did a Reg A offering in August. They raised $55 million in 18 days from 40,000 people. By the way, they could have raised another 50 million, but they were capped at this. This was the regulatory limit. That is how you measure fandom. That is how you measure passion. That is a key passion index. I come up with a math, and you can look at this on my Substack newsletter, Media War and Peace, which you can subscribe to right now. I'll wait. Don't laugh. But that's my math. That's what I came up with. This is going to be particular to your own fandom, particular to your own community. But crucially, you need a community management expert inside every organization that you work in, or you're going to get lost in the sea of fragmentation. Buying media, what's most critical? Outcomes. The movement of retail media on television. This is about not just reach, this is about outcomes. And outcomes are generated by people who are engaged, and engagement comes from fandom. Those are the rules of the affinity economy. And if you concentrate on the audience, if you concentrate on the user, if you put your users at the center of everything that you do, if you understand who they are, and center everything around them, which it means also including people in the room when you make big decisions who are from millennials and Gen Z, not just Xers and older, then you can do more than just survive. You can create a unified strategy, and you can put your audience at the core of your business, and you can thrive and succeed in this new era. This is where you can find all of my shit. You can take a picture now. Thank you very much. Are we doing questions now? So I'll take any questions that you have, but that is my presentation. Also your signal to clap. Does anybody have a question? Where are you from?
The United States.
No, I'm what's left of it anyway. What's your name and where do you work?
Brand strategist, Northwestern Mutual.
Cool.
Wanted to ask you specifically, what role, if any, do your data supply you with the similar trajectory for the notion of brand in the new affinity?
I think that's a great question. The key here is when you look at something like a Duolingo and the level of engagement that they have on their TikTok page. When you look at Crocs, who does the same thing, Levi's has a really good channel as well. These are not paid media outlets. These are content channels. The Washington Post's TikTok channel was so popular that the guy who hosted it is now leaving and starting his own daily show on TikTok. So the level of you want people to love your bank, right? Or your insurance company. I think you do both, right? Yeah, so I don't love my bank. In fact, I kind of fucking hate them. If you can give me a reason to love you, I'm going to be devoted. And not only that, I'm going to go out and tell people about it. But it's really, really, really important that you provide more than a checkbook, which is that even a thing anymore? But you should, you look at what Capital One is doing with their cafes around New York, and they've turned their spokesperson into a character. I don't know how well that's working for them, but I'm quoting it here. I'm not paid to do that. I'm not even a customer. So I do think this translates precisely over. I'm wearing a brand on my t-shirt right now, but I wear other brands as well. I have a cat t-shirt, the Caterpillar company. I wear this great brand called Ice Cream that I really, really love. So there are other brands that are very, very successful at this. People love Netflix, which is why they don't cancel, even though they probably should, right? So love is something that brands used to cater to. They've lost that because they've gotten lost in these weird KPIs that really are about making their bosses feel good and giving them something to put in their earnings report every quarter, as opposed to paying attention to what the user actually needs. Look at the unbanked in this country, right? Look at the level of disengagement that younger consumers have around financial products, and that in favor of things like Robinhood, which is, come on, let's be honest, a shell game to a certain extent. But that's because that company seemed to understand in a moment in time how to talk to a particular audience. So, put a lot of Gen Zers in the room when you're making these decisions and ask them, what's going to convince you to take a mortgage, if anything, ever? Go ahead, sir.
I was going to say, dead on, you can take this the way I like talk to my colleagues and stakeholders, we're moving from the notion of filling parts to filling hearts.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard to convince the folks that are on one side, the fall in line versus the other. And this is really helpful in understanding the community are where the hearts are.
Yeah, and
And with angels.
Angel is a really classic example, but there are others as well. There are restaurants, there are tons of different consumer brands out there that are adopting this and doing it quite well. Lego is a really good example. I mean, how did they transform themselves from a plastic block that hurts your feet into a film company? And yet they have, right? So there are tons of brands that have managed to do this. I only wear Adidas. There are several different reasons I do that. But there's a key element of fandom that is really crucial. But I have found that tons and tons of data and then a sharp voice connected to it really works. That's kind of what you saw here today. If you can do those two things, beat them up with actual data, and then make your points in ways that are humanistic, that they can understand. Ask them about their kids. Ask them about how their kids make decisions around finance. By the way, media illiteracy in this country is one of the most existential crises that this country has ever faced. Go out there and teach people how to have a healthy relationship with their money, and people will love you for the rest of their lives. That is how you build brand affinity. Any other questions? Way in the back.
As a creator for a kids TV show, animated show, which is expensive, I'm looking for seed funding and building relationships with studios and so forth. So my mental model is a traditional TV show relationship, but given everything you're saying, how would I fund into creating a new TV show on YouTube and just getting that seed funding and exit strategy 6 months, a year out and so forth? So it's a new model.
I think you dump that model and start with a character that you can afford to animate. AI has been very helpful in helping creators kind of level up to the studio level. Put those characters, even if it's a huge section of TikTok right now is people drawing shit. I don't get it, but there's a large audience for it. So if you had your artist go on and draw the character in real time and talk about the character directly to an audience, what you'll find is, do people want this? And if they do, then you're building an audience. You're building a set of intellectual property. And even if you get to the kind of micro or mid-level creator fandom, I'm not talking about 1 million followers, but 100,000, then suddenly you can go to a studio and say, hey, I already have an audience base here. Why don't you partner with me? And we can go and create the next Cocomelon. Cocomelon started on YouTube. It did not start as part of a large enterprise. By the way, Bluey, created by a teeny tiny little production company in Australia, of all places. And now it's the biggest hit on the planet Earth. I am a recovering television executive. I was fired by Comcast Cabletown on my 50th birthday, and I decided to go back to why I moved to New York in the first place, which was to create. And I started writing on LinkedIn every day. Every day and every day. And I looked at the stuff that didn't work, and I looked at the stuff that worked. And I leaned into the stuff that worked and learned from the stuff that didn't. Then I started a Substack newsletter, Media War and Peace, which you can subscribe to right now. Then I started a podcast, The Media Odyssey, which you can subscribe to right now. And now I'm being paid to talk to you. And I'm making more now as a creator, as the media fucking cartographer, than I ever did as an overpaid television executive. And I have way more freedom in doing so. Jimmy Kimmel and Joe Rogan both hosted a show called The Man Show. Terrible show, pretty embarrassing in retrospect. Jimmy Kimmel went on to host Live with Jimmy Kimmel on ABC, and he's made about $250 million over the ensuing 20-some-odd years. Joe Rogan started a podcast. He's made over $500 million over the last number of years. His reach is 10 times Jimmy's reach. He decided the last election. Jimmy, try as he might, hasn't decided an election in his life. So the creator economy, the affinity economy, is substantially more powerful and frankly more freeing for an artist than the gatekeeper economy ever will be. Greenlight yourself. Figure out how to do it, and you'll never have to answer to those motherfuckers again. Any other questions? Love Vivo.
So my question is, you talk about vanity metrics and views, right? And the reason why views are used for content providers as well as media buyers is because it's consistent.
Yep.
How do you develop a metric that becomes ubiquitous across all of the different content sets and fragmentation that media buyers can leverage that measures this like key passion index? Like, what does that look like to develop?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question, and it's going to be different for every brand. So let's take Vivo for a second, where half of your audience is on YouTube, and probably near half of your audience is on FAST. You're getting great metrics and data from YouTube. You're getting zero from FAST, right? Zero demographic information. You get hours watched. What the fuck is that, right? So I think what I would argue for you, and by the way, your platform sells albums. Your platform sells tickets to concerts. There's no question about it. It's demonstrable. When a video pops on Vivo, you can see the record pop up the charts, and you can see the concert sell a lot of tickets. It's very obvious. It's very demonstrable. I think you have to go much more towards performance metrics, meaning work with us and we will create, whether it's a QR code or some other way, to get a link to your actual transaction. Shorten the distance between view and transaction. Prove that you can do that over and over again, and then the vanity metrics will fall away, and the return on marketing investment, the return on ad spend, the provable and demonstrable transactions that you produce, which you know you can. You know you can. You've demonstrated to your artists every day, to your labels every day. They know it, they get it, that's why they funded you in the first place. So those are, key passion index sounds kumbaya and goofy and kind of hard to define. No, it's sales, man. How quickly does someone go from a view to wearing your t-shirt? That's a passion index. How quickly do they go from watching a piece of content on your platform and buying a ticket to a concert? That's a key passion. That acceleration, that modulation, that is really, really crucial. But if you leave it to the gatekeepers to provide you the metrics you need to run your business, good fucking luck. Any other questions?
I have a quick question. So there are a lot of brands and agencies here, and they primarily put their dollars into traditional CTV clerks, like Hulu, Disney Plus, Paramount. But with that data, and you talked about it, it's skewed, it's convoluted, it's a bit messy, it's a lot of bot fraud. But then you show all this data about YouTube is number one in viewership in every generation. You actually can get channel information back, video level data, working at Precise TV. Why?
Nice plug.
Yeah. Why is everyone putting their dollars into YouTube first before CTV when you don't even get that reporting back?
Fear. I would love to give you 12 other reasons, but that's what it is. Demographic, generational fear. Xers and boomers are afraid. They're just afraid. And by the way, a lot of millennials are afraid that, well, I work in the television division of my agency, and I have a television budget. And if I put it on YouTube, that's no longer television. Is someone else going to? But you kind of have to spoon feed them along the way. By the way, I'm doing my best to beat the shit out of that mindset every single day. And people get their feelings hurt when they bring me feelings instead of facts. You almost have to not care about that. The question is, do you want to exist in 10 years or not? By the way, really crucial point here I want to make. I talk about YouTube because they're the only social video platform on the television. Today. This week, the orange president of the United States is going to announce a deal to save TikTok in the United States. He's going to give it to one of his billionaire buddies, Nepo King Ellison. We are seconds away from TikTok getting on the television set. Seconds away. That's their next move. They've already done it with Douyin in China. It's the same move. The roadmap is there. They're coming. And then when they do that, we're only minutes away from Mark Zuckerberg either buying his way or building his way onto the television set. So the picks and shovels and infrastructure you build for YouTube today will pay you huge dividends 5 years from now when TikTok and Meta and some rough beast being born in some garage somewhere comes to the television set and destroys broadcast once and for all. So build the infrastructure today for YouTube, but then you will enjoy the benefits of that when the next YouTube comes along and the next YouTube comes along. And if you want the pattern, it started with cable, then it became satellite, then there was Netflix, then there was Prime, then there was HBO Max, then there was Disney Plus. Like, we see this pattern. This is not new. We've seen history repeat itself over and over and over. The olds resist the new technology. They poo-poo it. They call it wasting time. And then suddenly, it overtakes them. And suddenly, we forget the olds even existed, right? So that's the moment of time we're in. And I really do think you have to beat them over the head with data, tangible, demonstrable, provable data points, not just from Precise, although Precise has great data, but from other sources as well. Show them that 80% of their connected television spend is being wasted. Do you want a job in 5 years or not? And you have to put it in those very specific, stark terms, because that's all anybody understands right now. Everybody's looking over their shoulder waiting to be fired. Everybody in the media ecosystem, except me, because I have no boss. Well, I do, but she's not here right now, so I have no boss. But crucially, like, you're trying to save their careers, and you have to kind of put it in those terms, because that's all anybody understands right now. Anybody else? I'm going to be here for a little bit. Feel free to come up and bug me later, but thank you very much for giving me this time, and I'll give you back to Dennis.
Yeah, round of applause for Evan. That was amazing.